Hello everybody! So here is Link Deliri again, and I'm here with the reasonings in the open video, yet another one. For those of you who haven't watched one of these reasonings in the open videos of mine yet, this is a purely experimental segment that I make where I explain some thoughts that are going through my mind and that I haven't even finished pondering yet. So recently I have been pondering about DCHN, which is a subtyping system in socionics. So for those of you who are well versed in socionics, I'm talking about a system parallel to the subtypes that Gulenko has been working on. For those of you who have no idea what the hell I'm talking about, socionics splits types into subtypes. So some people would display more the dominant function, some people would display more the auxiliary function, or use them more somehow. And this would give a different blend to these types that explains some difficulties in typing, especially when some people are somewhere in between INFP, ENFP, or INFJ, ENFJ, and they don't know exactly where they lay. Socionics explains these difficulties via the subtyping systems. And Gulenko, which is one of our socionists, has developed this alternative system along with other people, I think. I only read about Gulenko, so I think it's him. Anyway, they have developed this parallel system of DCNH, which means 4 further subtypes that basically give a different flavor and split even more into even smaller categories. That's more or less the direction in which Gulenko in particular is going. I agree with him that is probably the most experimental of all socionists, and I see he self-types INTP, so that explains a lot. Anyway, I've been thinking about all these subtyping systems. I love learning about new things, so I'm quite a curious person. So I went into this DCNH thing because a lot of people accuse me of being a D type, which means dominant INFJ, and some people instead, I don't know. So these 4 letters basically stand for D dominant, C creative, and normalizing, H harmonizing, something like that. And basically a dominant type would go with a one of the others, would get along well with the normalizing type, whereas creative type would get along better with an harmonizing type, or vice versa. Anyway, these subtypes basically intertwine like the subtypes in socionics. And they're basically meant to just give a different blend, a different sense, a different idea, a different feeling of the type that we're talking about. I have been thinking also of another split that Gulenko makes, which is cognition approaches. I have been looking into that, and I see he's onto something. I'm not sure if he's getting more in depth about that or not. I see he's onto something, but I personally disagree about a couple of things. I'm not sure. I don't share his view completely. But I see that he's spot on about a lot of things also on that matter. Anyway, what is going on here is basically leading TI. We're seeing this person splitting into smaller categories. But personally, I start thinking, despite being one of the biggest fans of subtyping, I am starting to think that all this fractioning and subtyping stuff is actually going too much into destroying the system. It's like nihilism in a way. You go smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until the system doesn't exist anymore. This system, MBTI or Socionics or whichever one you're applying, they basically say the same thing. Anyway, this system is meant to create macro categories of attitudes, of mental attitudes that people share, that you're basically human beings. So what you're looking for when you're looking for your sociotype or for your MBTI type is not someone that has been picking on your life, describing every behavior you have from morning to evening. That is not what the system is about. What the system is about is a generalized way of thinking that you apply. And Jung actually decided to use this system and to come up with these 8 functions to help psychiatric patients reach a level of healthiness, of health, without the systems that were being applied at the times. We know that back then they were using also electroshock, which is not a fun experience to go through. So he was trying basically to save these people from these heavy medicines and electroshock and whatnot. And that's why he came up with these categories. And he was working both with psychiatric patients. We know that Jung was a psychiatrist, and with his students at the university at school. So what was going on there is that this person realized that as well as we have roughly a range of defense mechanisms that we as human beings apply and that we normally see applied in Enneagram, we also have some chains of way of thinking that are more likely in a person than in another. What Socionics and MBTI do is actually create a more fixed category of typings that goes more in depth on how these values apply in the person. So basically, once you have yourself clear, once you know who you are and what you're made of, what you're going to see in yourself is the dominant function. That is what you're going to see in yourself. So once you've seen the dominant function, all of these subtypings and subcategories and subsplitting and destroying things into details doesn't matter anymore. The reason why it doesn't matter is that basically we are human beings. So what we're doing when we're going into this splitting and subcategorizing is getting away and taking a distance, detaching from humanity, from our humanity. Human beings do have characteristics, and we use these characteristics to go towards the idea of uniqueness that identifies us as human beings. But at the same time, we also share something, and we also are part of a whole, part of something bigger, which is existence, which is the world. We as intuitive feelers know very well, I'm talking here in particular to ENFJs, ENFPs, INFPs, and INFJs, we know that the human being is basically a soul trapped into a body. And I'm talking here to ENFPs, you know that better than anybody else. We are basically souls trapped into a body. And during our prisoning in this body, we need to learn what we're actually doing here. So we know that as souls, we're part of a bigger thing. We're part of the essence. We're part of the whole. We're all connected to each other. We're all together. We're all one, as well as we're separated. But as thinkers instead, teachers, and we learn this in particular from sensory thinkers, we are also bodies. We're also physical beings that live in a reality that is real and concrete. And we as intuitive feelers, for example, need to learn from sensory thinkers that we are part of this sensory reality and of this real world. And therefore, we together create some sort of Tao, a balance that together comes to have a sense and creates the meaning of life. So we have this concept of wholeness and of being together, as well as the differences of um, subtyping and subcategories that are defined by the physical experience. I once watched a movie that I tend to think about when I think of this concept in particular, and it's called Lucy. And it's this girl that takes a pill and automatically starts developing sides of her brain that are unknown to humanity. And at the end, when she has reached a level of awareness that it goes beyond and transcends anything humanity could ever think of, this girl in the movie, this character, says something that struck me as absolute truth. She says that humanity has created the concept of unit to reduce existence to human understanding, and that's exactly how things are. Both things are absolutely real and absolutely necessary. I spent part of my life denying the unit as something valuable, but recently I got into reading a book about biology that explained the concept of unit at NF understandable level and NF acceptable level. Basically, you have this big picture, this wholeness, this blur, and this mixture of souls mixing with each other and swirling together, and you feel this wholeness inside of you and around you. Some of us even have experience of not feeling their bodies in some moments. And no, that's not the psychiatric condition. It is possible even without being psychiatrically ill. Anyway, this sense of allness and this sense of connectedness with everything else requires some sort of way to deliver it. Because otherwise, we lose this sense of uniqueness, this sense of identity, the sense of being us and giving a contribution to the world. So basically, it's two parts that need to come to an agreement. What I'm trying to say with this whole word thing is that it is necessary to come to generalizations to define this wholeness, this big image of this big picture that we have in our mind that sees the future, the past, all together in one, that sees all these souls going around and all the connectedness, how things are connected among them. I love the way that symbolist poets used to explain it, which is that there would be this spirit that is underneath everything and connects everything like a connecting tissue among things. I like that idea. It's a little bit dark maybe, but it gives the idea in my opinion. But anyway, without a system, without a way to explain parts of this wholeness, it is impossible to communicate with each other, to communicate among us as human beings. And that's why humanity came to the choice of the unit as a system to communicate. Still, we need to pay attention not to go too much in detail, because going too much in detail basically destroys the whole idea of a system and a concept. So if you like going into detail, I'm not here to tell you not to go into detail. You're free to do that. But remember that the more you aim to uniqueness, the more you lose touch with yourself, touch with the cosmos, and touch with the big picture. So basically, what I normally do and what I normally used to do, and now I'm trying to tune down a little bit, was to come to my MBTI type, which is also my socionics type, my sociotype, to come to my Enneagram, my wing, and my subtype. Then I like looking into the tree type because it helps me kind of see the core Enneagram and how it works within a more complex system, because I have a very holistic view of human beings, and I believe that we are not just heart, just head, or just guts, which are the three areas that we have in Enneagram. So I always try to look what other influences come into my personal experience when I look into Enneagram, and that's what the tri-type helps me do. It helps me see what other influences create this whole that is me, and that helps me a lot, actually understand a lot of things about me. Normally what happens when I look into tri-type, to be honest, is that I look into it and I realize what I'm not. And that's how it helps me. Anyway, yeah, this is more or less what I was thinking about. I don't, honestly, personally, FEIIs, so FEINFJs, are dominant INFJs by definition, according to Gulenko, because the extroverted subtype of INFJ, for some reason, has some things. Well, anyway, I don't remember exactly how it works, but if you look into it, you will figure out that the INFJ, actually, the INFJ FE, is necessarily a dominant type. But if you look into the description, if I look into the description of INFJ, of the dominant characteristics, I do not view myself in that. What I view myself into is actually the creative subtype, which does not apply to my socionics combo. So I'm not sure about that, and if it actually works, I am not really persuaded about it. It could work, but honestly, I don't see the point in that. I don't see the point. I can see the point of seeing Enneagram into detail, because at some point Enneagram stops. Enneagram is basically, if I don't go wrong, 138 types, considering Enneagram, wing, and instinctive variant. I once made a calculation. If I recall correctly, it should be 138 or somewhere around that number. Anyway, it's 9 types multiplied per 2, because it's which makes it 18, and then it's 6 instinctual variants for each of the 18 subtypes. So that makes sense for a reason, because Enneagram is a system developed and studied for personal growth. So when you have to grow and to study a path of personal growth, you need to know, or better, the person that is helping you needs to know what instinct you have stronger and what instinct you have weaker. But basically, the instinctual variant only says this person considers interpersonal direct connections less than social connections, or this person focuses on their self-preserving needs more than they focus on interpersonal personal bonds, and they do not value at all what concerns the social sphere. So this is basically what the subtypes are about, the instinctual variants, in Enneagram. And this is a subtyping system that to me makes sense, because basically it's not to define who you are. It's just a way to give you direction on which areas are going to be more problematic for you. Because, for example, let's take an Enneagram 8, let's take one Enneagram randomly. Enneagram 8 wing 7 as XSO. 8 wing 7 as XSO basically means that this person needs to do a path of opening up to others, slowing down a little bit maybe and becoming a little bit more wise because of the seven wing, that they need to do this path mostly in the SX area. So it means in interpersonal direct relationships, basically in the couple, in the love relationship. The second area in which this person is going to have some trouble is going to be the social realm, and that's where the fears of the eight, basically of the anagram, basically explode. The last thing is the least problematic area for an anagram, for this specific anagram 8, is going to be the self-preserving area. They are going to rock at that. They do not have fears in that sense, or basically their fears in that realm are more limited. They do not feel threatened in that area, which makes this anagram 8 completely different from an anagram 8 wing 9 SPSO, for example, which is basically a person that needs to grow in opening up to others, becoming though more identified with the society they live in, and that has a strong focus and will have a lot of issues feeling controlled in their personal sphere. And the second area in which they're going to have issues is going to be the social area. They are going to rock in relationships and not have trouble in relationships at all. So this is the reason why I can understand and I can support the idea of subtyping in Enneagram in particular. But what concerns socionics, I'm not entirely persuaded that even going into subtypes makes that much sense. In my personal experience, it only boosts doubts to an extreme, because if you are somewhere in between and not very sure if you are going to be if you are an ENFP and an INFP, for example, and you start looking into subtypes, you're going to have 4 types, which means extreme extrovert intuition, strong extrovert intuition with strong introverted feeling, with introverted feeling a little bit weaker, strong introverted feeling with strong extroverted intuition, with extroverted intuition a little bit weaker, strong introverted feeling. So you're basically making a bell curve where you already had issues between 2 polar opposites, and you're making a bell curve. So where exactly do you locate on this bell curve? If you start from the assumption that you're having the original trouble between 2 polar opposites because you don't know who you are, this bell curve is only going to increase doubts to an extreme. So that's why I'm saying that going into subtyping is not really helpful, and it doesn't really help you. The only situation and the only case in which I see going into subtyping useful is when you're doing the work of dualization with another person, with a partner. So you are in a relationship, you found the love of your life, and you're working on dualizing. That's when this subtype actually makes a difference, because you're not going to get along very well with the other, the opposite subtype to your personal one. Basically, if you are the creative subtype, you're going to get along better with creative subtypes on the other side. If you're not so much with the dominant subtype instead. If you are the dominant subtype, you're going to find the support of the creative function of a creative subtype a little bit too strong and too intrusive in a way. So that's the only case in which going into subtyping actually makes sense. Aside from that, honestly and personally, I don't see all this splitting and destroying things into details as having much sense, especially for NFs. It is already something, and it is already something to appreciate, that we are accepting macro categories. Let's stick to macro categories. If you're having issues understanding what your main modality is, your dominant function, do not go into details just to confuse yourself more. This is basically what I'm talking about. For example, an INFJ that is completely aware of being adrift in seeing the future and the past and possible consequences of situations and how situations developed and so on. That person that knows that they're doing this thing and that they are this thing is already a step ahead, as compared to another INFJ that knows roughly that she tends to predict things, but she's not sure how or where the hell that's coming from. Which is already better from another INFJ that instead doesn't even know what the hell she's doing. These are levels of self-awareness. You are dealing with someone in front of you that has a strong awareness, for example, of what kind of dynamics happen in her mind, especially both at a conscious and a subconscious level, because I've been working very in depth about that. The fun part about me is that I spotted my subconscious functions first, and then I started seeing my conscious functions, and that's actually funny. But anyway, that's basically what I'm trying to deliver here, that we are anyway a whole, and typology is only a way to help us understand that whole. And it doesn't have to become a way to split us so into detail that we don't know who we are anymore. Because if you go too much into detail, you start detaching from the origin, which means you're a human being. So you start becoming a robot. And it doesn't surprise me that it's an INTP doing that, because INTPs are well known for being the most human robot. So that's probably why they go in that direction. Anyway, yeah, I honestly appreciate the work of this guy a real lot, because I find him very spot on about a lot of things. About others, not really very spot on, but he's anyway adding something. He's contributing. He's giving new perspectives, and that's really something that I appreciate in theory. My personal favorite in socionics is Kaya, which is not very appreciated because she's biased. But hey, I'm well known for liking biased people, so yeah. I like her approach, because if you know that she's an ISFP, and you start from the assumption that she's an ISFP, you can see from her perspective how she sees the whole socionics world. So she's basically an ISFP looking at ISFPs, looking at ENTJs, looking at INFPs, looking at ISFJs, and she shows it from her personal perspective. So if you look at things from her perspective, you're going to see how the old MBTI rose is actually showing, and how they display their behaviors, their attitudes, their psychological sphere, and so on. She's going to be particularly biased about alphas, and that's normal. But she has this wholeness approach, which is, in my opinion, kind of odd for a sensor type, but she's anyway a feeler. So probably she feels the same way as every other feeler does. Anyway, I like her perspectives a lot because of this, because she has this central point from which she shows the fan of types. So yeah, this is what I was thinking about. Unity is only a way we accept to communicate. That's nothing but that. So do not start to when you have one as a unit, I am one human being, you don't need to go into this is my arm, this is my finger, this is my nail, more than the functions already do. So basically, let's see the functions as I have a brain, I have a breathing system, I don't know how it's called, a nervous system, and so on. So that's basically a macro structure. We INFJs all have that kind of shape of structure. So from that structure, you see how that structure displays in you. and how it applies to you. You ESTJs out there, hi ESTJs. You guys have this macro structure, superstructure, macro structure that works in a specific way, and it has to work that way, and that's where you start to see how you work as a person and how you display this macro structure in the world. So this is what I mean. Hi, ESTJs. Anyway, this is what I wanted to say and what I wanted to share about my risen thoughts and ponderings. So I think I will close this episode of the Reasonings in the Open series here, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.